one number's in here. I'm just going to reach in, pick out a number, and that way nobody can say I'm picking out the questions or choosing one over the other. And you ask your question, and you get one follow-up to it, and we go on to the next person. We see as many as we can do in 1 hour. So first one is number 48. Who's number 48? Yes, ma'am.
Hi.
If you can tell me where you're from and what's your name.
Sure. My name is Julianne Geedy Edwards. I'm from Manchester. Hi.
Good to be in town.
Hosting this.
It works.
So thank you so much for hosting this town hall. I actually participated in a teletown hall that you had a few months ago, and I asked you a question about NIH funding. I'm a cancer patient being treated at Johns Hopkins, and I understand from several conversations that I've had with Brian that you are in favor of NIH grant reform, and
That's right.
100% agree with you on that. But my question to you is, in the meantime, while you are looking at how best to invest, can you commit to investing in NIH increases for people like me who really don't have time to wait for you to reinvent the wheel?
Sure, yes, we did. And no, thank you very much for the question. I remember the question on the teletown hall. And I hope when we call your house, I hope many of you participate in teletown halls. We let thousands do it. Last year, as you know, we increased NIH funding $2 billion. This year, it's $3 billion. So we're now up, and we're going to be close to $37 billion here in the NIH. And so we are increasing it. We're trying to earmark some of the monies. We have the brain research going on. We also have obviously the cancer moonshot. But there's a wide variety of things the NIH is looking at. I think we need to look at Alzheimer's disease, especially because it's just such a huge problem for our aging population. But we are increasing. But I do think we need at some point to look at how research is going to be done in the 21st century, and to make sure that we have young researchers, that we encourage young researchers, because I do think, and the data shows pretty clearly, that the breakthrough discoveries are actually made by younger minds than mine. The average age when people win Nobel Prizes, is less than 40. And so we have to match when we're funding innovative research to when it's most likely to occur. And I think we've let the average age of the average NIH grantee just get too high. So Dr. Collins, who's the head of the NIH, knows it. It's hard to, any government agency that's large, it's hard to get it to change, but we're going to move it in the right direction for that. So thank you for the question. And one follow-up, sure.
Just the one follow-up, and I hate to be so health specific, but it's my primary focus. There's also a bill in the House that I understand in spirit that you support called the Removing Barriers to Colorectal Cancer Screening Act. And that bill has over 240 co-sponsors, and it's been stuck in committee for 7 years.
I didn't realize it that long.
Yeah, it's been a really long time. And basically what it does is fixes a glitch in Medicare that makes people pay if a polyp is found and removed. Obviously, a doctor's not going to leave that in there. It's a danger to the patient, but a Medicare recipient being slapped with a $300 copay unexpectedly, it's a lot.
Sure.
So I was wondering if I could ask you to commit to co-sponsoring that bill.
I think I am, Brian, my co-sponsor. I think I am a co-sponsor of the bill. We'll follow up with it so everybody understands. This is one of those things when you set a policy that sounds like a good policy, and then it gets implemented, it doesn't quite work as well as you thought. And the policy was to encourage colorectal cancer screening. They said, okay, if you have a colorectal cancer screening, there is little or no copay involved if it's a routine screening. But if they find something during the routine screening, then all of a sudden it's not, when the gastroenterologist goes to put in the code, it's no longer a routine screening. It's actually, you found something, and then you actually have to pay more, which makes no sense whatsoever, because that discourages people from getting the routine screening. So yeah, so it's actually a glitch. We'll follow up with CMS, with the Medicare administrator about that. Thank you very much. either 66 or 99. It's, I can't tell, it's probably 66. I don't think they go up to 100.
So the rest of the crowd.
Thanks for coming tonight.
Sure.
I'm a teacher in the county school system. I teach in elementary school. And my question to you is, why on earth is an assault weapon considered to be a weapon that any civilian should be able to carry when it is?
Yay!
When it is a weapon of mass destruction that only should be available to the military.
Well, because you would be to restrict the law-abiding citizen's ability to keep and bear arms under the Second Amendment is something we have to take very, very seriously. The framework of the Second Amendment, when the Second Amendment was written, right after the Revolutionary War, it was written to allow citizens, average citizens, to have and train with literally the same or better weapons than the military had. That's the facts. And you can go back and look at history books. When we fought the British, the weapons our sharpshooters had were actually better than what the British soldiers had. So the history is such that the Second Amendment is about the right of a law-abiding free citizen in the United States to keep and bear arms to potentially be in a militia. Now, weapons have gotten better, no question about it. Weapons have gotten more destructive, no question about it. We put limits. We don't, automatic weapons, which are what the military uses, of course, are not able to be bought by the average person. Semi-automatic weapons, whether you call it an AR-15 or you call it another type of semi-automatic rifle or a semi-automatic handgun, that is one of the types of weapons that are available to a law-abiding citizen. I believe you should not restrict a law-abiding citizen, and you should very strongly punish someone who is not law-abiding and uses a weapon in commission of a crime, no matter what the weapon is, whether it's a knife, whether it's a handgun. Of course, a lot of attention is paid to assault weapons, but the fact is that most mass killings are conducted with handguns. Most mass killings are conducted with handguns.
Do you have data to support that?
Yes, I do, and if you contact the office, we'll get you the data. It's about 69%, so between 2/3 and 3/4 of mass killings in the United States are conducted with handguns. The Fort Hood shooter, by the way, have fired 220 rounds from his handguns. 220 rounds. So again, anybody who thinks that that's a lie, contact the office. We'll get you the information.
Have some courtesy.
This is a difficult issue because all of us want to stop the type of thing that happened in Florida. The question is, will a ban on any category of weapon, like an assault weapon, will it stop that? And it's pretty clear it won't. These will occur whether or not you do the bans. So if we don't deal with mental health issues, if we don't deal with punishing people who use handguns or any other weapon, it's not going to solve the problem. It'll make us feel good for a little while that we did something, but it won't solve the problem. And I hope we can engage in a conversation about how to solve the problem.
Yeah.
Follow up.
So my follow-up would be, your guy in the White House just signed a ban on bump stocks, which takes a non-semi-automatic or automatic weapon and turns it into a semi-automatic or automatic weapon.
Well, it turns it into
Automatic.
functioning like an automatic. So it's a semi-automatic. Yeah. You can't turn a non-semi-automatic into an automatic. Yeah. Oh, I was a pistol expert in the Navy. I understand exactly what you're saying.
You don't work in an elementary school. You have to look out your window and wonder if somebody's going to come spray your entire class.
But I do work in an environment where I do work. When I cross the street to go into Congress, I worry that someone.
I don't enjoy that feeling.
So,
I don't. And my
but-
leg's been cut off. So.
No, it's not been cut off. Absolutely not been cut off. But we have to put risks in proportion. If we want to do something dangerous today, it's not going to your elementary school, it's go to downtown Baltimore. That's where the risk is.
Oh my goodness.
300 murders, over 300 murders a year with a handgun.
Come on.
None with an assault rifle.
Kids were just murdered
So-
in St. Mary's.
So,
Good thing it
with
wasn't
a
an assault rifle.
handgun.
It's a good thing it wasn't an assault rifle.
So,
Fucking worse.
it is, I'm not,
Isn't appreciated. And I'm gonna tell you something, you're well versed with the NRA's line.
Yeah,
sir,
yeah,
I'm-
yes,
I was-
yes. Boo, NRA, boo.
And yes, I support the NRA. They support the rights of the Second Amendment.
They feel
Just like many of you support the ACLU.
Don't put your hands near me, I'm telling you right now. Don't put your hands near me.
Now, I don't agree with the ACLU on everything, but I think it's darn good that in this country we have organizations that actually support our constitutional rights, even if we don't agree with them. That we have organizations like the ACLU, like the NRA, that support constitutional rights.
Yay!
I'll give you one last follow-up.
So, so the $20,400, the $20,400 that you accept from the NRA.
Yes.
My follow-up question is, how do you sleep at night, sir?
And I hope that that's a little it's actually,
Thank you for
I
your
have to tell you,
service.
I'm a little disappointed by someone who says they want to come here and have a dialogue and then leave. You know, you've walked out, sir.
We're still here.
And if you want to have a dialogue, let's have a constructive dialogue. And I encourage America to have a constructive dialogue on this. But if you think that, again, if you think that an organization that wants to defend a constitutional right is, and I'll tell you, look, I'm a life member of the NRA. Because I believe in the right of a law-abiding citizen to keep and bear arms in this country. And if you're not law-abiding, you have no right to do it, and you should be punished for it.
Not true.
So that's more important than children's lives.
Nobody has an issue with
So
guns.
that's more important than children's lives. Is it? Is it more important for the right to life? Is it?
53. 53. Yes, ma'am. 53.
Cut.
On both the federal level and the state level. So my question is, when federal politicians and the local politicians get on the air and we talk about the mentally ill and identifying them, how are they going to identify them when they have nowhere to go for services? So it's time and time again on an annual basis.
Thank you. Look, it's a great question, and I'll take it even one step further. We don't want to apply a stigma to going to get health care. So it's a double-edged problem, because we have to have enough providers, and then we have to make the idea of going for mental health care, we have to remove a disincentive to it, a stigma to it. And look, it's difficult. It's the reason why, for instance, many of you don't realize why the National Instant Background Check, for instance, is so ineffective at knowing who has gotten mental health treatment or who should, for a mental health reason, be denied access to a firearm, is because of this privacy issue with mental health. So to answer your question about funding, I don't know about the state. I'm not in the state anymore, the state government, but the federal government, in the 21st Century Cures Act, we increased the funding for mental health, as I'm sure you know. With regards to opioid addiction, a huge issue with regards to mental health. This current, the omnibus bill just passed, increase, I think we added another $3 billion on top of the $2 billion that our committee added for opioid addiction, which is really one of our largest mental health crises right now. Number of people dying from opioid addiction, more than die from guns, more than die from cars, more than die from HIV/AIDS now in the United States. I think it needs the federal, state, and local government interacting together. All three levels of government have to work with private organizations, because in the end, most of the mental health care in the country is delivered by private organizations, including the opioid crisis, addiction problems. You follow up.
I can tell you there's a lot of homeless people that have mental health issues, and they are dependent on the shelters when they are out in the community, because within the state of Maryland, they just passed a budget. They're decreasing the funding to community-based mental health providers. And that's a very scary thing, because you have some very vulnerable people who are being put in horrible situations.
And look, I agree. Again, I don't know what's going on in the state legislature, but at the federal level, we encourage community-based treatment. We think that especially for something like opioid addiction, as you say, for the homeless, that is the answer. I mean, that's one of the answers.
Opioid is public health, not mental health.
Exactly.
Thank you very much. Opioid is absolutely a mental health problem. Number 22. Yes, ma'am.
This is a plant, by the way.
I'm sorry, we got the microphone coming up behind you. It does work a little intermittent.
Hi, my name is Dawn. I'm actually a local resident in Manchester. I also run a business. One of my biggest concerns is still Obamacare, the Unaffordable Care Act. I was on your phone conference as well. And obviously it got nowhere this year, and I want to know what I can expect as a business owner and as a mom, a family person with $1,800 premiums and $6,000 a year deductibles. I want to know what we're going to do about this. I want to know that my Republican representatives are going to step up now, and handle this. This is one of the main things in Trump's agenda, and it's very important to a lot of us.
Look, absolutely. Look, everyone wants to make health insurance affordable to as many people as possible, and to ultimately achieve coverage for everyone. The question is, how do you get there? And if the answer is, Medicare for all, probably not going to work. I mean, Medicare is already broke. If we expand it to even larger amounts of people, it'll just be more broke. And in fact, if you extended Medicare to everyone, to the seniors in the room who I've committed, the president's committed not to affect Medicare, the quickest way to do it is just extend it to everyone. We don't have enough money to do it. So can we do it within the private sector? And that's what Obamacare attempted to do. But it did it in an interesting way, because what it said, look, we're going to require everybody to buy insurance, but then you can pay a penalty and not have to buy it. And what happened is all the healthy people paid a penalty and didn't buy it.
That's not true, actually. That's just not true. But whatever.
It left the, ma'am, please, it's her turn. I'm sure you have a number. If your number gets pulled,
it's not true. Anyway, go ahead.
So it devised a system where it was too easy, because of the expense of the insurance, for younger, healthy people not to buy insurance. So you left in the Affordable Care Act pools, the exchanges, you were left with individuals who had diseases, who had health issues that caused the insurance pool to be an expensive pool. And it got worse as time went on, because it was a spiral. As the insurance companies lost their subsidies, because at first billions of dollars were given to insurance companies to subsidize this, and the theory was that you do that for 3 years, you taper it off, and then the insurance companies could do it on their own. Well, they couldn't. The pools were expensive. Blue Cross Blue Shield last year asked for a 50% increase. This year it's going to be a 33% increase, or was a 33% increase. It gets unaffordable. The answer is, and what we tried to do, is to return the system in Maryland to what it was before the Affordable Care Act, where every person in Maryland could get insurance. You were guaranteed under Maryland law that you could buy insurance. It was through a high-risk pool. The high-risk pool was subsidized by a small tax on every hospitalization in Maryland, and by statute, the premium, and by action of the legislature every year, was between 15 and 30% higher than the average person's premium, the average healthy person's premium. And everybody goes, well, it's 15 and 30% higher. But now the premiums are 3 times as high as they were then. So I think most people would say, well, if I only have to pay 15 to 30%, I'd take that instead of 3 times as high. We tried to move to a high-risk-based system. It's the only fair system, because everybody, I tell people, everybody has a pre-existing condition, knows someone who has it, or is worried about getting it themselves. So we should develop a system where if you have a pre-existing condition that you can buy insurance and it's affordable, and the only way to do it is through high-risk pooling mechanisms. So unfortunately, the Affordable Care Act has become a high-risk pool without the mechanism to spread the expense. Now, my understanding is that I think just a couple days ago, the Maryland legislature has dealt with this in a way of kind of reestablishing a reinsurance or a high-risk pool. I haven't seen the final details because the bill was getting changed as it goes through its final process. I think in Maryland, they're actually going to restore that idea, which are going to allow those Affordable Care Act premiums to come down.
Congress.
Follow
Okay,
up.
so I'm an attorney, so excuse me when I say that's kind of a little bit non-responsive, or you went off on a sidetrack a little bit.
Bring me back.
Okay, so I'm going to bring
exactly
it back.
what was the exact question?
So I
Because-
want to know what to expect as a constituent
Yes.
for what Congress is going to do. I want to know that you guys have it on your to-do list. We're going to get back to this. And I want to know, based on what you said, my follow-up would be that you were going to look at reducing healthcare costs, not just insurance, but actually getting to the root of why these costs are so high in the first place. And then looking at, I mean, that step has to get done, right? That's common sense. And then looking at, how do we make the insurance work better so that it's more affordable for everyone?
Let me deal with the cost. I'll deal with the cost too. Look, the House tried, we passed the bill with a high-risk insurance pool in it, we sent it to the Senate, failed in the Senate. So the House tried it. We did what we could do, because for some reason the Senate decided that it didn't want to solve the problem that way, and it didn't propose another way to solve it. That's what's frustrating. The normal way is one chamber takes a position, the other chamber takes a position, then you send the bills back and forth. The Senate is broken. They refused to take up the bill. It didn't work. In terms of cost, the simplest way to bring costs down. If healthcare is funny to someone, I miss it. This lady has premiums $1,800 a month, and someone's laughing in the back. That's sad. That's
They're laughing at your response.
To bring down healthcare costs, the easiest way to bring down healthcare costs is the way we bring down costs anywhere else in the economy, which is through competition. Interestingly enough, the Affordable Care Act did really nothing to bring down costs. I mean, if we look at costs, it's actually now reassumed its normal increase in the healthcare cost of living that's higher than the average cost of living, because it actually discouraged health savings account policies where actually you as a consumer would actually shop around for services. And until we do that, until you shop around for services, and I'll tell you, and I'll give an example in this room. I'll ask, how many people of you have had an MRI in this room? Come on, half the hand's supposed to go up. The statistic is about half of America. How many of you know what it cost? To $10. Man, what did it cost?
Mine was $6.20, I think.
$6.20. How do you know exactly?
Because I looked at my EB.
You looked at the EOB.
EOB.
The average person doesn't look at the EOB because somebody else is paying it. So they know what the copay is. The average person will tell you, they'll tell you what their copay was the cost of the test. It's not true. So we're insulated from the cost, and we don't care what the cost is. Now, I guarantee you, if you had a health savings account or a high premium, for instance, for young healthy people, young healthy professionals, they should be buying a high deductible plan. Maybe it's a $10,000 deductible. For the first $10,000, believe me, they would look very carefully what the cost of everything was. And for something like an MRI, which actually is a commodity, because no matter what you hear on the ads, almost every MRI machine it delivers a product just like almost every other MRI machine, with some few exceptions for the very newest and biggest ones. You would shop around. And what you would find is roughly a threefold difference in prices if you called around for something as simple, for something as standard as an MRI. It doesn't occur. Everything else you buy, it occurs for. If I asked ladies in the crowd, those who have a designer handbag, what you paid for it, you would know within $5 of what you paid for it. You would know within $5 because it's expensive, and you shop for it, and you paid for it. Those are the three things that make you know what it costs. So anyway, that's what we got to do.
Wow.
Otherwise, it's very difficult. We have to put the consumer in charge of the healthcare. We have to give them the information. In this computer day and age, you should have the information on the quality and value of every product you buy, including this.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate you being here tonight, and thank you for protecting our constitutional rights as well.
Well, thanks for the question. Obviously, we have to get healthcare right, and I'm hoping that the Maryland bill, again, by reestablishing a high-risk or reinsurance pool, solves the problem. We should have done it nationally. All right.
They could have done it last week.
Number
but
31.
They could have brought down premiums last week.
31?
1.6
Yes.
trillion.
How do you propose to, you're talking about it like,
Where are you from? Are you from town here?
Yes, Hampstead.
Great.
How do you propose to cover the people who cannot afford a high deductible, can't afford to, the middle people who are missing out, who are paying out astronomical premiums, who aren't going to be able to afford some. I guess my frustration here is the fact that we're looking at healthcare solution that isn't going to solve the problem for the vast majority of people. There are a lot of people out there who, and having worked in healthcare most of my life, I know there are people out there who have a baby who's very sick, or who have a pre-existing condition. Somebody can have an accident and for the rest of their life be dependent on high cost healthcare. And the woman who spoke earlier, who anyone can develop cancer. And we have to have a system that supports everyone. That just doesn't support that people have a certain amount of money, they can pay for this, or they're young so they can have this high deductible. We need a healthcare system like other countries have that includes everyone. And I feel like nothing we have been proposing recently is looking at including everyone. And even Obamacare, there were a lot of issues with it. The two sides did not come together. And that was as much the Republicans' fault as the Democrats' fault.
Yep.
But somehow both sides need to come together and work on a plan that covers everyone and makes healthcare affordable for everyone. And that's part of how you bring the healthcare costs down. You talk about MRI machines. I don't get a choice on where I go. My insurance company tells me where I go. They're negotiating for the price of it.
Yep.
So even if you gave me a choice on where to go, my insurance company has already negotiated that. If we had a healthcare system that treated everybody equally, then we could get control over that. We could get control over the drugs, the high cost of drugs. I just feel like right now, you aren't working together. Both sides of the aisle aren't working together. And I think I speak for most of the people in this room.
Yay.
We are very frustrated.
Look, I was frustrated too because I think that the House bill, which again set up high-risk pooling mechanisms, no one has a reason, if we set up a high-risk pooling mechanism, and remember, when in 2012, the premiums for a 60-year-old person in Maryland were $500, $550. They're now $1,600. So the only difference between then and now is you pass the Affordable Care Act, and the individual, and this is the premium for an individual obtaining insurance in the state of Maryland, not part of a group, because one method to keep down costs is, of course, put you into a big pooling group. So a large employer. The president wants association health plans, which will help. So the pooling risk, when you increase the risk pools, obviously the costs go down per individual. But we had to, I think we have to go to that type of plan. Now, to get health care for everyone, you have to do one of two things. You have to either require by law that everybody get insurance, which they tried with the Affordable Care Act, and it doesn't work unless you make the penalty the same cost as the insurance. There are a lot of people in America who think that's not a particularly American way to do things, to require everybody to have something. Or you could do a British-style system, where everybody just by nature, by a fact of being here, is part of a national healthcare system, but the way that they don't have the equipment, they don't have the
That's just not true.
Okay. Call the office, we'll give you the article about that too.
I'm from a European country.
Ma'am, when your number comes up,
It's not true.
Ask a question. Of course it is. Just contact the staff. We'll get you the article about wait times in Britain versus the United States.
There's no wait time.
So if you have a system
from
where you
Ireland,
have
I know how it
a
works.
lower level of care for everyone, and in Britain what they do
We have all
is
the equipment that they have here.
people can afford it by insurance. So even in Britain, it's not like everybody has the same level of health care in Canada or Britain. There is a basic level of care, usually requires queuing, usually requires pharmaceutical, you limit the drugs you can have access to. If we decide as a society to go to that system, I'm like, okay, But look, we have to decide to have a very different healthcare system than we have now. And that is one of the solutions I've held for years. I don't mind the British style system. I don't think most Americans would tolerate the nationalized, what the equivalent of the National Health Service care is. And most people would buy insurance to supplement it. And in America, you know, I was told many times, you know, in America you can't have 2 or 3 tiered systems. We do now. I mean, there's no question we do. Anybody who knows someone who's on medical assistance knows how difficult it is to find a provider. But if you have a Blue Cross Blue Shield card, much easier to find a provider. So we already have it. Functionally, we have it. Maybe we should just go into it officially. Follow up on that.
I guess I'm having trouble understanding what the problem is with the national healthcare system where everybody pays into it. Because I think giving people the option of opting out was part of what really tanked the system that's...
I agree with you. Oh, I fully agree with you. You either have to have everybody in it or it doesn't work. It just doesn't work because you end up with a high risk. You end up with a high risk group where it's unaffordable. I fully agree with you that we would have to make a decision again as a society to say we're requiring or we're giving everybody some level of care, but it's costly. I mean, it is costly, but it's a decision as society we can come to.
But I don't see that coming out of Congress at all.
Because I don't think there's agreement among the American people, for instance, to go to Medicaid for all or Medicare for all, because those are the 2 models most frequently used. You say Medicaid for all, Medicare for all. Medicaid, first of all, again, it'll be hard to find providers for that basic level. So, for instance, what England does, because remember, we have voluntary participation in Medicaid for physicians. What England does, they require all physicians to work for it turns out in the morning you work for the national health system, in the afternoon you work for private patients. It's just a different, I mean, the government would have to require participation by the health professionals. And I don't think we're at that point where that's something we're going to do, but to make that system work, it's what you have to do. It's very complicated, but you're absolutely right. It was allowing someone to pay a penalty and not participate that caused the spiraling in the Affordable Care Act. Number 10. Bingo. There's someone early.
You got a rough crowd here because you have the Board of Education lying to it, the commissioners here lying to it,
Yep.
So you got a tough crowd.
This is America. It's okay. This is America.
I got an easy question for you. Is there anything going on down in Congress to require identification at the polls?
We think that it should be handled at the state level mostly, but I will tell you that it's gotten to the point where some states are clearly not requiring clearly not identifying their voters properly. So there is talk in Washington saying, look, for federal elections we'll have a voter ID requirement. Completely legal, by the way. I mean, the Supreme Court has ruled voter ID is legal. You just have to make it easy for everyone to get one. And there are ways to make it easy for people to get them. But I heard more of it 3 or 4 years ago, the idea of federal, for federal elections requiring voter ID. But in general, we like to leave voting, the voting rules up to states in general. And in Maryland, I was a co-sponsor of the voter ID bill. Practically every year I was in the state Senate, never went anywhere because for some reason, some people think you shouldn't ask someone for an ID at a polling place.
Well, the only legal power that a citizen has is the right to vote. And I voted all my life. But now that there's, like Governor Hogan is talking about redistricting to make it more fair and everything. But if you got like other countries interfering with our vote, you got illegals, you got dead people voting, wouldn't identification take care of that?
It certainly would make it much more difficult for someone who is deceased to vote. You have to show an ID. And honestly, I think the biggest problem is that we know that there are people, there are states and jurisdictions that allow individuals who are not citizens of the United States, therefore do not have the right to vote in the United States, and they're allowed to vote. This is serious because citizenship means something. I mean, citizenship is something you qualify for, you attain. There are obligations of being a citizen, and we should take it seriously when a state or jurisdiction looks the other way and lets non-citizens, because it dilutes the vote of a citizen, and that's what's unfair. It dilutes the vote of a citizen in the voting process. All right, number 43. 43, all the way in the back.
Actually, what I was going to ask about was healthcare, and I feel like we've kind of beaten that. So,
I mean, again, I don't think we're going anywhere with it. We tried.
What you guys don't make clear is that the healthcare is not affordable healthcare. You're paying insurance companies that make billions of dollars in profit, and you're forcing Americans to do it. That was my problem with the ACA, is that it forced me to pay a company, not Universal,
Exactly.
but a company, a private company
industry
that makes a lot of profit. And that was my problem with the ACA, and I think it's terrible because you shouldn't force Americans to have to pay a private entity anything.
Correct.
And that is my problem with the ACA.
Let me just address that. You still get your question. It not only made you buy it from that company, it guaranteed profit for that company. Now that's pretty amazing. It guaranteed profit because it said, yes, you know, your MLR, it's called the medical loss ratio, you had to pay out at least 80% of the premium you took in. But if for some reason you underestimated the risk, it actually paid you. It literally guaranteed a profit, which is actually what we're talking about, cost sharing subsidies now, the CSR payments, things like that, which again would guarantee a profit. I think that's the worst part of it. I mean, I don't mind you participating with companies as long as they take a risk. But they were taking no risk. They were becoming just middlemen for the government, and that's the problem. I mean, that was a big problem. But go on to your question.
Really, my other question is I don't think you can address it, and that gentleman over there sort of got to it. I live in Deal Island, and I also live in Carroll County. I have 2 properties, and you are my congressman in both places. And to me, that is ridiculous. You were gerrymandered out, and I know.
I'm still 30 minutes from the other edge of the district. Yeah.
And I know what happened with Maryland. I knew there was some issues. I know Martin O'Malley even testified that they did it to get rid of Roscoe Bartlett. And I just want to know, I haven't heard anything. I hear about Wisconsin, I hear about Pennsylvania, and I don't know what happened there because I live in Maryland. But is there anything happening here with that? Because I know they fixed Pennsylvania.
Supreme Court today.
Well, they kind of fixed Pennsylvania, but yes. Yeah. The Supreme Court heard the case today. The Supreme Court heard the case today, Benishek versus Lamone. Which was brought by a citizen who was in Roscoe Bartlett's district and got gerrymandered out. And look, the map, those of you who don't know what the 3rd Congressional District of Maryland looks like, Google it. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And literally, it is one of the 2. In Washington, people will literally tell me, is that real? Is that 3rd Congressional District really the 3rd? Yeah, that's really what it looks like. It's wrong. It's just wrong. It divides communities. It's very interesting because the Maryland Constitution for state races, for your state Senate and delegate races, actually says that the districts have to be compact and respect jurisdictional and geographic boundaries whenever necessary. And some of you may not remember, but I do because I was in the state Senate at the time. The redistricting map in the last redistricting for the state actually got challenged by Senator Norman Stone in Dundalk because they didn't like Senator Stone. He was the senator from Dundalk for decades. They drew his district across the bridge into Anne Arundel County. Literally across a bridge into Anne Arundel County. That takes nerve. I mean, you know, they say, you know, in cities you go down one street and you get a bunch of houses and connect it to another group over there, literally across a bridge. He challenged it, he won. And the court actually said, the court actually redrew the map. The same protection doesn't exist for congressional districts, which is a curiosity, because it didn't exist in Pennsylvania either. The Pennsylvania judges implied that since the Constitution of Pennsylvania applied that same reasonable, compact language to state races, they applied it to Congress. No court in Maryland has done that. But this is taken to the court, and it would be simple in Maryland. I mean, look, there are two ways you can solve the problem. One is the way the governor says, is you bring it to a nonpartisan commission. I fully support that. I testified for it. Look, I'd be the biggest loser in that, okay? Because they gerrymandered this district to be a Republican district, giving me lots of places, like I'm here right now, that were Roscoe Bartlett's, okay? But the fact of the matter is not fair. So that one way is they could pass the governor's bill, but honestly, the Democratic majority in both houses don't even take it up. They don't even take it up in Annapolis. The other way is you could pass a constitutional amendment that actually requires it, just like it does for state races, requires it for the federal races. Again, it would require the act of the legislation. Legislation's not going to do it. What can I say? I mean, I honestly think if the governor has a second term, I think he will get something done in the second term on it. Because I think the people will have spoken that this is an important issue. And 75–80% of people think it's an important issue. And it actually is. It's just not fair the way we divide neighborhoods. Lucky number 13. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. So I live here with my husband in Hampstead. Been here for about 30 years. And I'm actually changing from what I thought I was going to ask you about based on what's already been said this evening.
That's fine.
However, it's connected. So this past Saturday, I was in the Capitol at the March for Our Lives rally, which was amazing. I was very inspired by some amazing young people who showed a tremendous courage and eloquence as they spoke about their fear and their anger and their frustration, their sense of betrayal. And it was very moving. I'm also an educator and I work in the public library system here in the county, so I'm required to go into schools on a weekly basis to do my job. My husband is a 40-year retired educator who spent a lot of time in schools. So it is about school safety, and I wanted to honor the students' messages about that, but it's much broader than school safety. It's just our general society feels unsafe to me. It can happen to us anywhere. It can happen to us here, in a movie theater, at the ballpark, wherever we go. It doesn't feel very safe anymore. So I listened to you talk about the Second Amendment, and I am not a constitutional scholar, but it seems logical to me that we are talking about 21st century weapons and 18th century laws. And that amendment speaks about a well-regulated militia.
Yes.
And it is the only amendment, in my understanding, that calls for regulation of that militia. So to say that there can be no limits on what an individual citizen can own or use, or how they use it, or where they use it, or how they obtain it, I mean, that feels groundless to me. So I feel like you cannot look in the eyes of those young people and say that their lives are worth less than, someone's right to own whatever it is they want to own.
Well, let me address some of those points. And look, I fully respect.
Make one more point.
Okay.
Just to say, I lost my mic, but just to say, I'm from a family of hunters. I'm not interested in taking weapons away from people who are using them in reasonable ways and who are responsible. But that's, there's an awful lot going on that's not responsible.
Sure, and you have the opportunity for follow. No, let her have the mic. She has to follow up. She'll have to follow up to it. All right. First of all, I completely respect the young people who want to get involved in this discussion. This is great. Because normally we think young people they don't care about things, they don't pay attention to things. This is great that they're paying attention to things, and I think we should engage them in a very useful dialogue on this. But it involves educating them. One of them is about the background of the Second Amendment. Well-regulated militia is a well-regulated militia. It's sad that you find a serious dialogue funny. I mean, the problem is we have to have a dialogue. We can't have people laughing at the other person.
I agree 100%. I agree 100%.
So let's talk about well-regulated militia. What is a militia, first of all? Militia is not a function of the state. A militia at that time was any group of citizens who took up arms to fight, in that case, it was, when they took it up in the Revolution, it was to fight the British. What does well-regulated mean? It means well-trained. Regulated in the language of the era, which is what we have to understand. Well-regulated means a well-trained militia. And it specifically says the right of a citizen to keep and bear arms. It doesn't say the right of a collective organization of troops. It says the right of a citizen. So, the rights of the people. Well, the people as citizens. I mean, the people in the parlance of the Constitution, citizens. So the question becomes, does it lose its value as we go from the 18th century to 21st century? What was the Second Amendment about? The Second Amendment was about human nature. The Second Amendment was a group of people having power, whether it's the British, whether it's the Nazis, whether it's the communists, wanting to suppress another group of people over whom they want power. That's what it's about. It's human nature. And ma'am, I wish human nature changed from the 18th century to the 21st century. It hasn't changed. We still have the North Korean dictator suppressing his people, killing his people, restricting their rights, because it's about human nature. We can have a discussion about changing the Second Amendment. Look, and Judge Stevens, I guess, wrote an opinion today. You know, we should have a discussion. Let's have an American discussion about it, but let's have both sides of it. The fact of the matter is that part of our liberty and freedom derives from the genius of the writers of the Constitution to recognize human nature. Not human nature at that point in time, but human nature over history. They were all expertly trained. These men, well, they were all men, they should have been some women, but they were all men at the time, who wrote the Constitution, were well-trained, well-read in history, in philosophy. They understood human nature. The Second Amendment is about human nature. And that's why I'm so strong. And by the way, we don't allow anything. We don't allow automatic weapons, we don't allow grenades, we don't allow a lot of things the military has for private citizens. So we can have this conversation. I urge this conversation, but it has to be placed in the setting of, do we think that the ideal of freedom and liberty, which is based upon which the Second Amendment is based, is that also important? I think it is. Now we can weigh the importance of the two, but I think it's important to mention it. So I believe in the Second Amendment. And I will tell you this, and many of you know, my parents came from countries where you couldn't have a firearm. They were communist countries. And if we think that human nature will mean that this country could never become like that, let me tell you something. You look around the country at some of the actions that the government takes against unarmed citizens, and I think the Second Amendment is valuable. I'll just leave it at the Second Amendment. Follow up with that. So I think about it. I don't just dismiss out on a hand that we shouldn't have this discussion. We absolutely should.
So I would say in response to that, two things. That maybe you asserted that human nature hasn't changed since the 18th century, and essentially
has not.
We might be able to agree about that.
Yeah.
But the weaponry disposal has changed. And there were not semi-automatic weapons or bump stocks or all these other things. I don't need to know. I personally don't need to know the name of every piece of every weapon and how it works to know that I don't want it pointed at me or my child. I don't any more than I need to know how to build a bridge to know that I don't want it to collapse when I drive over it. I mean, it's basic principles at play there. I want to be safe, and I want to turn to those young people and say, we're doing everything we can to keep you safe. The other thing.
There's no one who doesn't want to keep young people safe, and I hope we.
I'm not so sure.
Well, ma'am, anybody who implies that I or any of my colleagues don't think about the safety of children, that is no way to begin a discussion by accusing the other person of something that I think is a vile and immoral accusation. I have 5 children, 7 grandchildren. Of course I care about children. And if you start a discussion, and you didn't, but other people have started the discussion with me as you don't care about children.
Thank you.
That is ridiculous at the end, and we can never have a dialogue when we start that way.
So why are we talking about
The other thing I would just say, there is a philosophy that the needs of the many can outweigh the needs of the few or the one. So sometimes that has to be taken into consideration.
Sure. You know, it's a cliche, but it's true. You know, the Bill of Rights is the Bill of Rights, not the Bill of Wants or Needs. And the people who say, well, you don't need to own a firearm. I know, I don't need to vote either. I don't need to do a lot of things that I have the right to do, but it's your right to do it. And we can have a discussion about taking away a right, but we have to understand the historical foundation for the right and what message it sends when we take away, when we restrict a right. Again, I would proffer that the first thing we all should agree on is that when someone commits a crime with a handgun, they should be punished severely. Okay? Because again, law-abiding citizens have guns. Now, here's the statistic, and those of you, and again, some of you say, well, that's a lie, it's a lie. We'll send you the article from the Baltimore Sun. Baltimore Sun did a study. 100 consecutive crimes, it was, I think it was in a period 2 years ago, 100 consecutive crimes in Baltimore City with a handgun, where a handgun was used in a crime. 25% of the time, no prosecution on a handgun charge. So right off the bat, 1/4 of the time, they didn't even bring a charge. Handgun used in a crime. The average sentence when it was brought was 16% of the maximum sentence. And when a violent crime was committed with the handgun, the sentence was 25% of the maximum. Now, I don't know about you, but that scares me. That's why there were 300 murders plus in Baltimore City, is because they're not, and the vast majority of handguns, none with AR-15s, and I think 1 or 2 with a long rifle, long gun. It's called long gun, so shotgun or a rifle. That scares me, because the first thing we should all agree on is if you pick up a handgun and threaten to use it against another human being, you should be, honestly, you should go to jail for a long, long time to think that behavior over in a civil society. And before we take the rights away from people, let's first punish the people who don't. And I hope we can all agree on that. And as we go, and again, we have to discuss these things, because the most dangerous thing you can do tonight is not to go to the elementary school here. It's to go downtown Baltimore tonight. Any of you want to go for a walk in West Baltimore tonight? The odds are against more children, way more children are killed in Baltimore City every year
and sending him this video
than in any Maryland school. Way more children. Where is the outrage for that? Where is the outrage for that? We should be outraged for that. Number 6. Good, this one got an underline on it, so I know where it is. Yeah, no, we got the microphone coming up.
My name is Raquel Walsh. I'm a resident of Manchester, and I'm feeling very discouraged because I feel like you're constantly supporting the federal government in its race to the bottom as an employer. Our federal government employees serve Americans in important ways every day. Our elderly, our children, our disabled, our poor, our veterans, and we're constantly having our funds cut, talk about cutting our pay, talk about cutting our benefits. We should be doing everything we can to attract the very best people to work for the government. And we can't do that if we can't match private industry, if not in pay, then in benefits. And I'm very frustrated. I'm frustrated at being used as a pawn in political maneuverings. We went through 2 shutdowns this year. And when is it gonna end? When is this narrative of these lazy government workers gonna end? Because everyone that I know that works with me works hard to achieve our mission.
Sure. Well, let's talk about it. Nobody's talking about cutting the pay of government employees. So let's just be fair, right? Because only in Washington is a decrease and an increase a cut. Right? Federal employees get pay increases, right? And have not had a pay cut. Wait a minute, in 8 years, let's be fair, in 8 years, no federal employee has gotten a cut in pay. Thank you very much. So again, we can dialogue about it, but if you begin by saying federal employees have a pay cut, it's just not true.
No, I didn't say they have.
She didn't say
that. I've heard talk about.
But it never happens, right? So a lot of people talk about a lot of things. So for instance, we talk in private industry. Private industry talks a lot about pay cuts of their workers when times are bad, things like that, right? But it rarely happens, and it never happens in the federal government. Now, with regard to the benefits, let's talk about federal employee benefits. The federal employee system is one of the few systems where we still have, for a large number of federal employees, what's called a defined benefit instead of a defined contribution system, right? So actually almost the entire private world has gone to defined contribution system for retirement. The federal government hasn't yet. So I would say if we really want to be competitive with the private, why aren't we going to a defined contribution system for the federal employee? I'm sorry, so there are two types of pension systems. One is you actually pay into the retirement system, and then that's pooled and it's allowed to increase in value, and then when you retire, you get the value of what you put in, and usually your employer matches, the federal government matches it. You get that. A defined benefit is when there's a contractual amount. So, for instance, you worked for 25 years in the federal government, you will get this amount of it's called a defined benefit, rather than a defined contribution. So it's not what you contribute, it's just a defined benefit. Private industry has years ago, gone away from, it used to be private, it used to be the benefit system was also the way it used to be done, defined benefit in private industry. Trouble is with private industry that for accounting purposes, you accrue a huge responsibility into the future, because you have promised every employee to get this amount of money. If things go bad in your company, you're broke. So now the problem is we have the PBGC, the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation, with all kinds of workers who had promises made. The companies go out of business. Now actually, you, the federal taxpayer, are helping pay those pensions, those promises made. So the world has, in the United States business world, has gone toward a defined contribution, because now the company's they help you. If you put $1,000 in, they put $1,000 in. That's it. Their liability is over. There's no future liability for the company. Now, when the federal government's running a $21 trillion deficit, I think it's time to consider going to a defined contribution plan for federal employees as well. Because the accumulated, everyone in this room who pays taxes is going to have to pay otherwise this future cost. So yes, that element of benefits changes, but the healthcare is among the federal employee health benefit plan, as you know, is among one of the best plans. You get a book about this thick with choices, right? The pay, you get, I don't know where he gets better. Okay, different government. Okay, but normally, look, the government health care benefits are usually pretty good. The pay depends on what you read. Yes, some studies say that the federal government, when you add the benefits plus pay, is actually more than the private sector. Some say it's less. It's all over the ballpark. But I agree with you. Federal employees are very important. I know that the agencies that have to interact with people and implement regulations, look, it's an important function of government. If it's not, we wouldn't have it there. So yes, you're right. We consider it. We give raises. I'd like to think we're competitive, because there's evidence to both that federal employees earn more in the total package. There's evidence they earn less. So I think we're probably right where we ought to be. But you're right, federal employees are valuable. There's no question about it.
But the defined benefit is part of what does attract people to government and what keeps people at government. My agency is still using green screens. We don't have all of our systems web-based yet because we can't afford it. And now we're having trouble finding IT specialists, because who wants to know? First of all, people don't know the coding anymore. And second of all, who wants to do that kind of work when you can go to another company and be using the current IT products? And I see people leaving because we're not staying competitive, and there's still the narrative of these overpaid federal workers, and I don't see that that's true.
Yeah, look, I don't hear that narrative very often, but I will never defend the procurement process of the U.S. government and what you have to work with. I was in the military for 17 years. I know exactly what you're talking about. It is hard. It is hard within that system to have up-to-date things to work with. It's frustrating. It's bureaucratic. I get it. I fully get it.
Excuse me, sir. Do you care about
ma'am, everybody you must respect. Part of being in America is you actually respect everybody else.
But I wanted the young activist that she was talking about.
Ma'am, do you have a number? Do you have a number?
Yes, I do.
Then sit down and wait your turn. Okay? I will stay, of course, let me tell you something. If you start a discussion, a serious discussion, with implying that the other person doesn't value life, that is immoral and it's wrong. It's a wrong way to begin discussion. I will stay, I'll tell you what, we're going to be done in a few minutes. I will stay to answer your question after, but you must respect everyone else here. Okay? And I will stay and answer your question. You will have your question answered by me. But you must respect everybody else waited. You'll have to wait for your number, okay? Number 8. You do think that's fair, don't you?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, number 8. Now, someone can give her the number 8 if you want. She can answer the question. That's fine. If you want to do that.
There you go.
That's fine. Who's number 8? Who's number 8? You're number 8. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
So hi, I'm Jacqueline Slade, and
Where are you from? Are you from town here?
Yeah, I'm from Hampstead, and I go to school at St. Paul's School for Girls, and everyone at my school is scared. We are scared for our lives. We are scared that we're going to die every single day. And everyone in every school is scared of the same thing. And, well, not every school, but most schools is scared of the same thing. And we want some stable gun control measures to be imposed.
Sure. So what measures do you think? Because we're gonna have a discussion now, and you're gonna So I want to know what you think would stop this, because we just can't say that we're gonna pass something that makes us feel good. I want to know what you think can actually stop this based on the facts of what has occurred with mass killings over the past 15 years in the United States.
Well, sir, I surveyed the students at my school about what measures they thought would be the most effective. And they thought that one of the most effective would be having universal background checks, along with raising the age for purchasing a gun. And I'm not saying you have to do this, but they also thought that banning assault weapons would be a good idea.
Okay. Let's take the first thing, the universal background check. You do realize that almost every mass killing that's occurred has not been a failure of the background check system, right? You do realize that. So it's a little bit unrealistic to expect that will solve the problem, because historically that wasn't the problem in those cases. So I understand where you're going. Now in Maryland, you should feel safe in Maryland because we have universal background check in Maryland. You do realize that, right?
Yeah, I'm just
okay. So we have it in Maryland. So the second one is raise the age of buying a firearm from 18 to 21. The vast majority of these were done by people underage who did not. Ma'am, excuse me. You have a number 2. You can get, when I call the next number, you can ask that number to go to you.
He can be condescending because the NRA fills his pockets.
Ma'am, that is absolutely not the way to have a grown-up discussion about this. You don't want to have a discussion. I'm having a discussion with this young lady.
You're condescending and rude.
You are.
Really?
Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are.
Really?
Yep.
We disagree on a viewpoint, so that's condescending. No. Your attitude is
The way
condescending
you
because
people
you
is
think.
condescending.
let her talk.
It is.
What's that?
Let her talk.
You have to give her your number, and then she gets the follow-up question.
I just got
I didn't think so. Okay, so let's talk about 18 to 21. It was not an issue because the people who are under 21 they got the firearm illegally. Okay, so if you boost the age from 18 to 21, it just means you'll be illegal getting the firearm under age 21, and you want the right to vote at 18, don't you?
Yeah, I'm.
So we're entrusting you to vote, to join the military, fight for our country, but if you're a law-abiding citizen, you can't have a firearm. Not sure about the logic of that.
I'm not saying these are the measures that need to be imposed. I'm just saying that we need to open the discussion and that we need to.
Absolutely. My gosh, I absolutely agree with you. You have to have a discussion. But we can't start a discussion with, you don't care about children. Remember, your first question to me is, do you care about children? I hope that's ma'am, we'll play the tape. Your first question was, do you care about children?
No, I said, do you care about my life?
Okay.
Whoops.
That's pretty darn close. Of course I care about your life. I care about every life. And to even suggest that the person who you're having a discussion with doesn't care about your life starts the discussion the wrong way. Okay?
I'm just saying everyone has the inalienable right of life, and
absolutely.
I think that the Constitution, if inflicts with the inalienable right of life, I think the Constitution needs to be amended and changed.
And ma'am, if we can get an amendment, if majority of Americans want it, and you know, 3/4 of the state legislatures, then let's do it. There's a system to get it done. But in the process, we're going to have to ask ourselves, is that really going to solve this issue? And the answer from even other areas, I mean, I'm assuming you don't want to take away all firearms. Or maybe you do. I don't know. Do you?
I think that people who want to hunt responsibly and such can have the right to a firearm, but I don't think anyone has the right to own an assault weapon that is used in military.
But you do realize that the AR-15 is not used in the military. The military weapons are automatic.
M16. Assault rifle.
It's the same thing, the M16.
Well, it's a big difference between an automatic weapon and a semi-automatic weapon. That a hunting rifle can kill people too, and handguns can. And the shooter in Fort Hood had handguns. So I want to solve the problem with you. We have to define the problem, define what the possible solutions are, and then see if those solutions are actually going to solve the problem. I don't think those are, but if you told me that what we want to do is we want to, for instance, we want to make sure that when someone enters a school, they don't know if there's someone armed in that school or not. Okay? Right now, there are jurisdictions where they go into school and they know there's no one armed, because even the resource officers aren't allowed to carry a gun in that school. That makes it a target. I believe that we should agree that someone going into a school should have no idea if someone in that school has a gun, because that will deter them from going into that school if they do, right? I mean, we can start there. It doesn't have to be a teacher that's armed. It can be a school resource officer.
From the survey that I did at my school, I surveyed 188 people, and only 12 of them supported arming teachers.
I don't support requiring teachers to be armed, but let's say you had a veteran. Let's say I decided to go teach. I'm a pistol expert in the Navy, I'm a veteran, and the jurisdiction, because I think you should leave it up to the jurisdiction, the local jurisdiction, the local county says, you know what? If a veteran or a retired law enforcement officer wants to teach in our school, they're eminently trained to have a fight. If they want to have a concealed carry weapon in the school, they should be allowed to do it. Let me tell you something. Just the fact that that jurisdiction said that means that someone who's looking to commit a violent mass murder act in that school knows they could be going into school where someone can have a gun. There are places around the country, like the theater in Colorado, which was a gun-free zone, like that school in Florida, which was a gun-free zone, which, by the way, part of the failure was that the school resource officer was on the outside, not inside, and didn't do his job to go in. There are other solutions we can have. And again, we're not saying arm every teacher. We're not even saying you have to arm a teacher, but I do believe you should give a look. You look, Carroll County thinks that's a solution in Carroll County. To allow one of their teachers to take a course and to be allowed to do it, Carroll County should be allowed to do it.
We don't need more bullets flying in our schools. There were resource officers they weren't able to get rid of the shooter.
St. Mary's County.
It didn't. He killed himself. He killed himself. He killed himself. He killed himself. He killed himself.
Sociopaths on murder-suicide missions don't care if a teacher has a gun.
Wow. That's really rude. I have to tell you, that's really rude.
I just want to make sure you're ignorant.
I think it...
I just want to make sure that we can open the discussion about discussing gun reform and
absolutely, absolutely. Let's have the discussion. Let's sit down. And the way you'd approach it if you were writing a paper in school, you get the pros and you get the cons. You get all the evidence on one side, you get all the evidence on the other side. I appreciate that the students in the school have an opinion and they answer the but again, we ask the question, should we arm teachers? What about if we ask the question, should we make sure the school resource officer is allowed to carry a firearm? Do you think the students would say, sure, right? I think they would. I think most people like the fact that.
And I'm going to
and look, God bless you for standing up and engaging in this discussion. I think it's a great idea. Absolutely. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Can she email you and continue the discussion later?
Sure, absolutely. And I'll send you the references on this. Again, we have to approach this the way you would approach a serious term paper in school, which is let's look at all the evidence, and then let's have a discussion, come to a conclusion. Number 35. That's going to probably be the last question of the night.
That's not an empty chair over here.
35 is an empty chair. All right. How about number 9? 9. There you go. Right next to number 8. That makes sense.
Frank Goodmeyer from Hampstead.
Frank, welcome.
I guess this is relating to her question, not mine. When are we gonna have that discussion?
We're having it right now. We're having it tonight. That's how it starts. In the United States, that's how it starts.
Bring it before the Congress.
Well, our members are out this week, just like I am.
So next.
Going around the district. Man, well, sir, I'm not sure we're ready to amend the Constitution next week, but they're going around the country, and we're having this discussion around the country, and that's the way it ought to be, because I will tell you, having been in the legislature, that the quick answer is usually not the one that works.
What is assault weapons banned in this country for 10 years?
The quick answer is usually not going to work. So we're having the discussion tonight. I'm sure my colleagues around the country are having this discussion. We're going to get back into Washington. We're going to say, okay, what do people think?
No,
what are we hearing?
Within your congressional district, that we have a panel discussion where we can take all of the pros and all of the cons.
Great.
And so when will we have that?
Well, we're having the discussion, but I will ask you, I will urge people who are as passionate as you are about it. The one thing I ask you not to do is, which we've kind of heard here tonight from some people, not many, and certainly none of the questioners, is you can't start the discussion by saying you don't care about something. Of course we care about something. And I appreciate that you didn't. Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Well, we're going to have a discussion. Believe me, you're going to hear more because the discussion is occurring nationally. You're going to hear more about, okay, what would work and what wouldn't. Would in fact a ban on AR-15s stop mass school shootings? No, it wouldn't. Does anybody believe that if we banned AR-15s tomorrow, there would never have a school shooting? Of course not. People would go with a handgun into a school. Now, we should have a discussion about Army school resource officers. We should have that discussion.
How do you know that will work?
Because would you go into a place and attempt to commit a crime if you knew someone in there had a gun to stop you?
Didn't someone do that on a military base? That happened on a military base. Right? It happened on a military base.
They were banned from having firearms in that location. They had no guns to fight back with.
Pistols so why aren't we having a discussion on that?
We can, but when you go, because that's a much more difficult discussion, because now you're talking about, instead of something that only 4 million Americans have, or the 4 million AR-15s, I think, now you're talking about 100 million. Now you're talking about disarming citizens.
It's the same answer that we're looking for.
Yeah, but honestly, I don't think America's ready to become Australia and turn over their firearms. I just don't think so. Actually, there's some evidence that if you look at trends, I can show you some graphs actually not working so good. Anyway, listen, thank you all for being here tonight.